And with that, the NFL offseason, I guess, is officially underway. Another edition of Kevin's Corner. We are less than 2 weeks away from the NFL Combine here in Indianapolis. So the official start of the offseason certainly begins very, very quickly if you are the Rams and the Bengals. I'm Kevin Bowen, back another edition of The Corner. I think it's the first time I've ever used that phrase, the corner. Eddie Garrison is with us out of the bullpen. Chris feeling a little bit under the weather. You guys have heard Eddie on our airwaves and certainly on this podcast several times. Eddie, I know you had some rooting interest in Cincinnati, emotional interest. I don't know if it was financial, but emotional you did. So apologies on how that one ended.
I had emotional interest in Cincinnati, but I had financial interest in the Rams. So it was a win-win either way for me.
Yeah, I think I was kind of in the same boat. Today's podcast, we're going to get into the quarterback options for the Colts. We've kind of delayed this a few weeks, and honestly, I'm thinking to myself, we probably should get to it because there could be some movement. But let's begin with the Super Bowl. We'll obviously do Twitter questions to cap things. You know, when I ended the show Friday, Eddie, with Jake in the mornings and just, why am I picking the Rams? More impactful players at the other positions that aren't quarterback. And as much as Jalen Ramsey had some up and down moments, I also think Ramsey, we forget about the play he made on T. Higgins, on that first drive of the game.
Right after he got burned by Chase, yeah.
Yeah, right after he got Chase. I guess they're set them up for the field goal. Forced Cincinnati to kick a field goal, I think it was. Mm-hmm. That was a huge play in the game. You saw it. I would have handed out co-MVPs for Aaron Donald and Cooper Kupp. In the third quarter, when the Rams are so stuck in mud, it was Donald and that defensive line that kept them in it. If Cincinnati gets one more score, there's a huge play there in the third quarter after the interception off of Ben Skoranek, shout out to Notre Dame's hands, that pick by Stafford. Cincinnati can punch it in there and go up 2 scores. And Donald on a 3rd and 3 just manhandles the right guard, just bull rushes him right into Burrow. And again, it's a 3rd and 3. Very manageable situation. Cincinnati picks that up there and they score a touchdown. Now they're up 2 scores. And boy, I don't know if the Rams have the potency to get, yes, they eventually got 2 scores, but still, that's just a different psyche. And you certainly have to abandon the run. Granted, I thought Sean McVay should have abandoned it a little earlier. But I just felt like I watched that Sunday night, and in terms of the Colts, I thought to myself 2 things, Eddie. Chris Ballard was really frustrated by the Colts in 1-score games, being 2-5 this past year. Mm-hmm. Well, to me, when we talk about closers, you talk about pass rush, and you talk about a passing offense, they can be a closer too and kind of putting games away. Well, the Rams needed to get the lead, so they needed to make sure that their bats did the work, and then their bullpen came in, and the bullpen was Donald in closing that out. The other thing that I thought back to was, and I remember having this conversation, this would have been Joey Molinaro and I back a few years ago, when the Chiefs won the Super Bowl. We mentioned how it's not necessarily about 1 to 53 and roster depth.
Yep.
It really boils down to a handful of positions in today's NFL, and that being quarterback, that being wideout, that being left tackle. You could probably group the pass rush together as the entire D-line, and then cornerback would be the other one I'd throw in there. And if you look at the past, really dating back to the Chiefs, so Chiefs, Bucks, Rams, and you look at those 5 positions, the Colts having great roster depth helped you out in Arizona this year. You certainly needed to rely on that, but ultimately, you look at, Stafford, Wentz, Cooper Kupp, Michael Pittman, and the rest of the wideout group from there. Hell, Andrew Whitworth, Eric Fisher is probably a draw. Some might argue Whitworth's a better pass blocker. Certainly the D-line, it's laughable to compare the Rams pass rush or the Colts pass rush to the Rams pass rush. And then at corner as well, the Rams are superior in all 5 of those spots. The Bucks were superior the previous year. The Chiefs certainly the year before that. So that's what we've gotten at this kind of for 2 or 3 years now, and we've seen it come to light more and more. It boils down to those spots more than ever. You want to have depth. Other positions matter to a degree. They don't matter as much as those 5. And I think that, to me, walking away from the Super Bowl and the playoffs in general, Eddie, I was reminded of that.
The old cliche, it's about players, not plays, KB. And if you've got a bunch of just players like the Rams did and like the Bengals.
At those spots.
Yeah,
too.
yeah. And you don't just have guys, you've got serious dudes. It makes a legit difference. You look like Tampa Bay, they had Shaq Barrett and Jason Pierre-Paul on the outside, and Ndamukong Suh on the inside with Vita Vea. And then this year with the Rams, you have Aaron Donald, but Leonard Floyd made a couple plays. Von Miller made a handful of plays. And then you have Cooper Kupp. And I don't know if there's a more dominant offensive player at his position you can throw out. You can throw out Devontae Adams, but
dude,
that last drive, it was Cooper Kupp and nobody else.
Did you see the stat going around yesterday? Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp in the fourth quarter this year in the playoffs?
Mm-mm.
Stafford to Kupp, 12 targets, 12 receptions for 200-some yards, 9 first downs, and 2 touchdowns. Like, think about that, Eddie. The fourth quarter of a playoff game when everyone in the building knows who you want to get the ball to. Certainly Sunday. I mean, think about it. Tyler Higbee is hurt coming into the game, their number 1 tight end.
Yeah.
Odell Beckham gets hurt in the first half. Huge loss in that game. And yet they still find Kupp. We'll get into it a little bit later, but, like, I know the Matthew Stafford no-look pass to Kupp has kind of made its rounds. Watching that video and the replay now, Eddie, I thought to myself 2 things. We had Kurt Warner on the morning show. I think you and I were texting about that, I think, at one point. Maybe.
I think so.
We had Kurt Warner on the morning show a few weeks ago, and Warner was talking about Carson Wentz and his eyes. It feels like the eyes let Kurt Warner know how great of a processor you are at quarterback. Mm-hmm. You watch that play by Stafford. He knows Von Bell, the safety for Cincinnati, is looking at his eyes. So Von Bell reads Stafford's eyes. Stafford manipulates him to the flat, or kind of that area to the right of Kupp, if you're looking at it from behind the huddle. And yet he trusts himself. Obviously, he's got an arm that can make that throw, but he trusts himself to make that throw. And he hits Cooper Kupp in stride. I mean, Kupp didn't even have one bit of hesitation in making that catch there. So that was my first thought. And my other thought was a point we made on last week's podcast of, you saw it with Andy Reid a handful of years ago now. You saw it with Kyle Shanahan, I guess last draft. You saw it with Sean McVay last offseason. 3 of the more brilliant offensive minds in the NFL. Mm-hmm. But with those 3 at various points in their careers, they have said to themselves, probably in a meeting room, guys, we've got a good quarterback. We need someone that can do more. Can do something that I can't draw on that whiteboard behind me. And it was Alex Smith to Patrick Mahomes. It was the 49ers were trying, obviously, with Jimmy Garoppolo to Trey Lance, and then obviously Jared Goff to Matthew Stafford. It was a reminder, and I think watching these playoffs, and I'm curious to hear from Chris Ballard and Frank Reich at the Combine in a couple of weeks, because, you know, when we talked to them after the season ended, the playoffs hadn't started. Mm-hmm. Were the playoffs a reminder, or did it send a message to them? Is there a change of thinking and saying, man, you got to raise the ceiling at quarterback?
Even and another thing that stood out to me, this happened early in the game, and Chris Collinsworth pointed it out. It was Joe Burrow, and it was one of those first drives. I can't remember what. I think it was that drive where they were after the chase play or whatever, and the Rams were bringing the pressure, and you could just see Burrow's eyes. He just like, nope, yep, out of my hand, and right into the flat. I'm like, and that's the kind of stuff you need. And to see that from him in his second year after missing so many games last year,
plus giving us pass protection.
Yeah.
You know, he knows full well that he doesn't have a clean pocket for too long. So, shout out to the Rams. I think I had Bills over Rams at the start of the year was my Super Bowl prediction. I was kind of in the same boat. You know, I had Cincinnati. I bet on Cincinnati to win the AFC title leading into the divisional round. So I was lucky I got that W, but then rode the Rams with a Super Bowl prop. It just, that Bucs game, or I guess I should say, I think I bet on them before the Bucs game, the Cardinals game. Watching Von Miller and Odell Beckham, like, because they kind of were hit and miss those final few regular season games. Like, I think the Rams almost had some maintenance with Von Miller a little bit, and Odell, Robert Woods tears his ACL, so that obviously put him more into the limelight. But incredible. Cooper Kupp, absolutely incredible. Aaron Donald is the greatest defensive player that I have seen in my NFL lifetime, my lifetime as well, being 32 years old. So, unbelievable season. The final 7 games, I think 6 of them were 3-point margins, and the 7th one was a 7-point margin, which, again, is just wild to think about it like that as well. So the joy on my wife's face when she looked at me last night and was like, wait, no Monday Night Football, Bachelor, and this is where we are at until, did you say September? I reluctantly said yes. I said, we can watch highlights. We can watch old games. We can go that route if you want to. Joy on her face, not joy on my face, but great season.
You don't like watching Clayton on The Bachelor?
Boy, I don't tune into a lot. My wife is not a Clayton fan at all whatsoever.
Neither is my girlfriend. Nope.
Yeah. I don't know. He's like, so boring, same conversation with everybody, blah, blah, blah. She was happy that he opened up a little bit last night, or I don't know, one of the girls opened up. I don't know, yeah. Yeah, so that's where we're at in the Bowen household right now. All right, let's get into it, Eddie. Quarterback options for the Colts. Let's start here. There's 4 of them I've kind of painted out. We will get to Twitter questions after this. I sent you the link. What's the first one?
Let me get my announcer voice. Number 1, Carson Wentz, keep him.
So that's option 1. We'll get a little bit in the Mortensen report from the weekend. I think if you guys have listened to this podcast, you know that to me it was kind of only a matter of time for the national media to kind of take on what I think a lot of us here locally felt about that. Let me actually text my wife real fast. My daughter had a appointment this morning. Well, 20-monther for Rosie Bowe.
Dad duty. That's the pod is going on. One thing I want to point out about that report is there's that picture of him in the box with Jim Irsay.
Right. Thank you for that.
And part of me believes that that's where it's coming from.
So you think it dates back to January?
I think so. It dates back a little bit there, and maybe more to veteran. He's probably one of those guys that checks in every now and then when he kind of picks up on something, and he's like, "Oh yeah," and he just kind of casually mentioned it, and then that's how I think that report came to fruition a little bit.
Yeah, I'll touch more on that in Twitter questions. But no, I do think that's a good point that you bring up there and something I wanted to focus on. So keeping Carson Wentz, solely based on finances and resources, if you made the decision solely on that, you would bring back Wentz. Just 'cause financially it makes sense. You don't have the number 1, you don't have the first round pick. And is there an element of year 2 under Frank Reich, full off season, Carson's going to have a full training camp? Do you think there's more there? Like those are the reasons. And again, some people will roll their eyes, some people will laugh at this, but let's just address it, keeping Wentz. I come back to the Chris Ballard reaction to when he was asked at his season-ending presser, are the things fixable? And Ballard just kind of looked and shrugged his shoulders a little bit, and, well, that's something we got to figure out with our coaching staff. That's not a lot of conviction. That's not a lot of confidence for a GM and head coach that usually have a lot in those sorts of situations there. So I think that is kind of the bigger question of all right, year 7, 29 years old, is this stuff still correctable at this point, or is Wentz who he is? So I think that is the debate that you have in keeping him. And also, and this is something we've talked about, there's kind of these 2 paths, Eddie. If you keep him, then that allows you to focus $40 million in free agency on your in-house guys, on a couple of out-of-house guys. Then you come back to the draft. You have the second rounder. You have the third rounder. You have I think you have room to make 4 substantial moves: 2 in free agency, 2 in the draft. That allows you to maybe cross off. Okay, here's a wideout. Here's a tight end. Here's a edge rusher. Here's a left tackle of the future, along those lines. So it allows you to support the quarterback, even though the quarterback might be the same guy.
I agree. When you say 29 years old and there's things he still needs to fix, to me, that's just like a red flag. You've been in the league for 7 years now and you still have some of the same issues that you had when you came into the league, or you're regressing more than you are progressing. I don't know. To me, it's just it's just skeptical to me. You should be getting better as you get further along in your career, not at a standstill or even going backwards. You could argue this is the best offensive line he has played with in his career outside of the what was that, 2017 Super Bowl year?
Mm-hmm.
The Eagles did have a really good offensive line then, but you can still kind of see those Philadelphia issues coming back toward as the season wore down and got further along. Just holding onto the ball too long, very inconsistent, and then it seemed like he didn't trust his reads toward the end of the year.
And that last part, I've used the phrase a lot, kind of the mental scarring. Mm-hmm. At this point in Peyton's career, if you want to kind of look back on the man outside of Lucas Oil, he had won an MVP, I think 2 MVPs maybe at that point. It was kind of just like a mental hurdle at the playoffs. We haven't even really seen Carson Wentz in the playoffs yet, Eddie. So, that's kind of the next layer of this of, boy, you're really projecting far out there. So that would be concern I have. Okay, so keeping Carson Wentz, what was the next option?
Trade for a quarterback.
Okay, this is the path, Eddie, that would likely offer the quickest fix. Have you in a position to be a January-type team next year, but it also would be the costliest. And it also is an option as we sit here on February 15th and record this. You say who? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like the momentum is very much of Russell Wilson staying in Seattle. Mm-hmm. It seems like it's kind of building to Aaron Rodgers staying in Green Bay a little bit. We might be a couple of hurdles away from getting there, but that seems to be the point. I've talked about it a lot over the past month. If you're a Colt fan and you want Carson Wentz to be gone, you need to pray for dominoes. You want Watson to be traded. You want Rodgers to be traded. You want Wilson to be traded. They might not come here, but it might all of a sudden mean, oh, wow, that guy's available. Oh, wow, that guy, could be, for the right price, things like that. So the reason I sit here and think it's still somewhat realistic that a trade is possible, I don't think Jim Irsay steps in much, but does he step in here and says, guys, I say all chips in. I've watched the last 2 years, first-year starting quarterbacks win Super Bowls with their respective teams. Mm-hmm. They traded for both of those guys in Matthew Stafford and Tom Brady. Now, again, is a Brady or a Stafford available right now? It doesn't look like it, but does one become available in the next month? Do you need to call all 31 teams and find out, hey, we are all of our chips are in? There's another layer to the debate of what type of trade package could you create? Is that enticing enough? So that's another layer to it. But if you're going for the all chips in, this is the route that you go with. But having said that, it's also the costliest.
I think if Russell Wilson does become available, and if they can make a package and/or a run at him, I think he may provide the best long-term option at the same time, even though it may cost you more dollars. You would pay for that because he's been in the big games. He's won, 2 Super Bowls?
One, right? Seattle? Didn't they lose? They beat Denver, lost to the Patriots?
That's right, yeah, so 1.
But certainly many runs.
But he's been in the playoffs.
Yeah.
He understands what it's like to be a leader. Terrific guy off the field, too.
Right. Oh, hell, he's sitting next to Commish on Sunday night.
Right. So there are so many things that come with Russell Wilson, not just a player, that provides some long-term not clarability. It's not even a word.
Sounded like a word to me.
Maybe I just made it one. I don't know. But it gives you some clarity long-term if you're able to get a guy like Russell Wilson.
Well, I'm glad you brought the leadership component, Eddie, because to produce a trade like you're going to have to produce, we know what leadership means to the Colts. We know what it means at quarterback. And you're going to have to check that box. Again, DeForest Buckner, that played into that trade as well. Okay, the next one that we went with.
Sign a free agent.
Okay. So.
Fitzmagic?
Yeah. So the list, Eddie.
Teddy Two Gloves?
Seriously. Bridgewater, Fitzpatrick, Cam, Andy Dalton, Mariota, Winston. Is Jacoby a top 20 quarterback again?
Oh,
Want to go back there?
Can we not do this again?
When you look at the list, I almost walk out of the room and say, why not just play Sam Ehlinger?
Chad Kelly? Bring him in.
I saw Chad Kelly sign in the CFL. Which is just kind of crazy to say, Ehlinger is an actual possibility compared to those guys. I think such a signing, it would help your competition. It would provide a more experienced backup. But aren't you still in quarterback purgatory?
Mm-hmm.
Like, aren't you still there? And I've always said this. If I'm making a Band-Aid move, the Band-Aid move, and Brady was a Band-Aid, clearly. We saw it, 2 years, and he's hung it up. Stafford, it's probably too harsh to call him a Band-Aid, but we know Stafford probably isn't going to play for another decade. Mm-hmm. The Band-Aid move has got to get you Super Bowl caliber. And none of those guys get you Super Bowl caliber. So that's where my hesitancy comes. A pro to doing it is, from a resource standpoint, this is relatively safe, and it brings some change. You're doing something different to quarterback. You're not breaking the bank for these guys. Mm-hmm. It is somebody different. Again, this probably falls into more of the likely camp, just because resource-wise it makes a lot of sense. But I almost think it's just like, you're just doing it to say you did it, Yeah,
I think this is the most logical route for me personally, because of the other holes that you have to fill still in order to be within that Super Bowl roster.
Any names stand out to you
in terms of free agency?
Yeah, like if you're going to go that route. I know it's a group that won't flatter a lot of people. I feel like the popular one to some has been Mariota.
We've seen Mariota as a starter. Very inconsistent. I still worry about the injury factor in there with him being somewhat of a mobile quarterback. You might be able to get him for the least amount of money out of that grouping. I don't know. But none of those guys are just like, yes, I want to go buy tickets and watch him on Sunday.
Yeah, when you start comparing them to the other AFC quarterbacks, and boy, that's the thing you feel with Cincinnati. And again, Olivia, right, Cincinnati fan?
Yeah.
That's what it is for you guys. Just how many chances are you going to get? When you look at Josh Allen, you look at Patrick Mahomes, you assume Lamar Jackson in Baltimore, you assume Justin Herbert and the Chargers. Who knows about Mac Jones, Trevor Lawrence, etc.? Where's Deshaun Watson going to end up? I mean, that's just what makes it so difficult right now. This is the best I've seen the AFC, and I don't know, maybe my brain in 2005,
right.
would have said a similar thing. I was probably more worried about if girls were going to talk to me in the hallway than I was about the AFC quarterback situation. But I probably haven't brought this up a ton, Eddie, but I do think there's an element of return on investment, and not to get super whatever financial businessy here, because Lord knows I would struggle mightily in that professional industry. Carson Wentz there's a cap hit of $29 million in 2022. You want to start getting into the return on investment. That's a little bit different than some of these other quarterbacks on that list there. Okay, so that was signing a free agent. Our last one, I assume, is draft.
Yep.
I looked this up at the end of the year. I believe I have this right, Eddie. Of the 16 teams in the AFC, only 3 of them started a quarterback who they did not draft. And I mean as the main guy for the whole year. Colts, obviously. The Titans with Ryan Tannehill. And then the Broncos with Teddy Bridgewater starting more than Drew Lock. So that's kind of jarring. I've always been team draft the quarterback. Listeners to this podcast know that full well. I didn't realize it was to that extent. 13 of the 16 teams in the AFC with a drafted quarterback. It's so difficult to find the long-term answer at QB unless it comes via the draft. The Drew Brees free agency is as rare can get.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, drafting the right guy isn't easy, but it's the clearest path to potential success. And I've always felt this about Frank Reich as well. I just think you're playing to his strengths. If you can identify a quarterback in this draft, and let's just throw out names, Matt Corral from Ole Miss. Maybe he's got a couple traits that Frank Reich likes. The injury's going to scare some people. Maybe the offense of Lane Kiffin isn't exactly, projecting to the NFL. Who knows what. But do you feel like Frank Reich's coaching can take the 5 traits that you want in a quarterback? Corral's got 2 of them. Again, I'm hypothetical here. Can Reich correct 1.5 of the other 3.5 or whatever 3? And then you just live with him not having a perfect 5-trait QB. Is it time just to play to Reich's strengths? Is it time to say, all right, Frank, we gave you Jacob Eason. He still was pick number 120-something?
Yeah.
Just pick 40-something. Offer you a little bit more here. I get it. Outside of Derek Carr at wherever he was drafted. He was pretty high in the second round.
36th.
Yeah, Garoppolo, I think, was a little bit later in the second round. I mean, sure, you got a Dak Prescott. Like, I know full well, Kirk Cousins, I know full well you don't have many answers to this. Russell Wilson, again, very rare in the NFL present day. But such a selection could offer a big reward. It would take patience. It would take development. It would be a risk. The answer might not be there in 2022, and that might piss people off because you wouldn't get the immediate results. But this is now offseason number 4 where you're going into it still looking for the long-term answer at quarterback. And I just think you have to exhaust every resource. And by that, I mean, even though you're drafting 46 overall with your first pick in this year's draft, you still got to look at those quarterbacks like none other and say, all right, Malik Willis, we got to go move up for that guy. Or, Kenny Pickett can be Derek Carr, and we're going to move up. Like things like that. No one gives two shits what the Rams gave up to get Stafford. No one cares what the Chiefs gave up to get Mahomes. No one remembers Buffalo trade up twice to get Josh Allen. Like, you identify the QB, and you do everything you can to go get him.
I agree. And you look at the draft, I mean, there's only like 3 or 4 options that'll be in that first round. You have Sam Howell, Desmond Ridder.
It's not pretty.
Matt Corral, and then Kenny Pickett. Like, does Malik Willis, I mean, I know he had a really, really good Senior Bowl.
Right.
Does he get vaulted up into that end of first round, high second round, or does he stay in that second round because of the competition he played in college? You don't know how he's going to be against NFL caliber players.
No, it's a great point. And again, this quarterback class, Eddie, to call it weak would probably be accurate. By the way, it sounds like a really good edge rushing class this year in the draft. We'll get more to the draft here coming up, but I do think that's something to keep an eye on, although the Colts certainly have spent their fair share on edge rushers. But I'm a believer he keeps swinging. Anyways, those are the options. 4 of them. Keep them, trade, sign a free agent, draft one. The options are
gun to head. Which option would you take,
man? Gosh, I shouldn't have asked you to fill in on the podcast. I didn't know you'd ask me the hard questions. None of these answers offer obvious solutions, Eddie. Where would I go? I'd certainly look deep into a trade. Make them say no. The Kings with Tyrese Halliburton to the Pacers, to the rest of the NBA, he might not be available, but if you want this guy, you got to give us that guy. Now, I don't think the Colts are in that situation with leverage. I've always been team draft. I need to look at the quarterbacks a little bit more. Willis has some intriguing traits. I kind of like Corral a little bit. I think there's a little bit of kind of follow the leader. I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too much into the injury and just how kind of devastating that was for him and how the Ole Miss players reacted to that. But I do think there's a lot there. And I will listen to people. I mean, I've had several people DM me over the past few weeks about isn't the best option just to support the quarterback and then you figure out quarterback in 2023? Sure, but is Jonathan Taylor another year older?
Darius Leonard?
Is Darius Leonard another year older? I think Jonathan Taylor is really rare. I also have got to acknowledge the position he plays, and Father Time eats that position up more than any other. So that would be a little bit of a concern there. Dude, I don't have an obvious answer. I sit here and think this. The Colts would love to trade, but free agent move is probably the most likely. This is me with my just pure gut. This is no intel. Do I believe they're fed up with Carson Wentz? Yes. Top down. You guys have heard me talk about that for weeks now. But again, solving the answer is so difficult. The draft at quarterback just kind of entices me. And I think as an organization, you've got to look at that and say, is this the route we need to go? Does this help our head coach? Is this, development necessary? Really, the only position you're keeping intact on your coaching staff seems to be the guys around the quarterback with Marcus Brady and Scott Milanovich, position coach. Hell, every other position seems like you're having to find a new coach. So, Eddie, I would not say use your money on betting on any of those options, but this is kind of where I'm at right now.
I agree with you. I think you summed that up pretty well. I think an interesting quarterback for me is Desmond Ridder. I think he's NFL caliber, but
God, he just was so bad in the semifinal game. Man.
I agree.
I know. I know that he didn't get a whole lot of help around him, but I didn't love that.
I didn't either. I mean, the one thing that I guess you can say that his issue was ball placement, and I guess that propped up again at the Senior Bowl was that he would throw 8 out of 10 perfectly, and then that other 2 were just out of reach high, and when he does miss, it's high, and if he's going to miss high, then he's going to expose those wide receivers to a rib injury or some sort, or it's going to get tipped and it'll be intercepted. But I think ball placement is one thing that is very coachable and that you can fix within a quarterback with mechanical issues that he may have. But to me,
probably Phillip Rivers' greatest strength.
Yeah.
And that's something that Ballard mentioned at the end of the presser, or end of the season presser, Eddie, was, to play to Frank's offense, we want to get the ball out a little bit quicker. That can help your offensive line, of course. Man, it's a fascinating debate. I think we get some clarity relatively soon. I know from hard date standpoint, that second day or third day of the new league year is, when Wentz is due another $7 million, I believe. But it wouldn't stun me if we got some clarity somewhat soon.
Ready for trick questions?
Let's do them.
All right. Bloppa?
Yeah, Bloppa. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've thought a lot about the quarterback situation. One may want Rodgers or Wilson, but they don't seem possible. Matt Ryan came to mind. The questions are, first, is it within Indy's reach? Second, is it a substantial improvement over Carson Wentz?
Okay, let's go to the back one first there. I don't think it's a substantial improvement. I think you make the argument, is it any improvement?
Agreed.
Matt Ryan might be a little bit more consistent than Wentz, but I've long believed this about Wentz. He's got a volatility that it can be a good volatility. And I think to make a playoff run, you need to hit that high ceiling. Also, I didn't realize this. Matt Ryan's cap hit is massive. Someone was mentioning to me. $40 million or something?
It's outrageous.
Jeez. And I'll go back to what I said earlier. The Band-Aid has got to get to Super Bowl level. I don't think Matt Ryan would do that. I did want to get to this Chris Mortensen report a little bit more here, Eddie. And for those that missed it, Mortensen on NFL Countdown on Sunday basically said it looks bleak for Carson Wentz in Indy, probably be traded or released by March 18th when that money is due. Mm-hmm. You brought it up earlier, and that's what stood out to me first initially was Chris Mortensen is saying this. Not Adam Schefter, not Ian Rappaport, not Jay Glazer, Mortensen. Mortensen is extremely plugged in with the Irsay family and the Manning family. He's in the suite, like you said, at that national title game, Georgia-Alabama. I found that interesting. What I also found interesting was, did you see Colin Cowherd's tweet?
No. What was it?
As well on Sunday? So Colin Cowherd and Chris Ballard have a nice little relationship.
Really?
Colin Cowherd tweets this. Carson Wentz's story doesn't sound like something an always prudent GM Chris Ballard would do. Sounds like an impulsive owner still pissed after the season meltdown would desire. So have we gotten to a point now where Ballard has backed away from the season and maybe his aggressive stance we saw in Wentz right after the season, maybe has that softened any? And now this is just strictly Irsay's venom? Is it, to your point, Eddie, that Mortensen has this stuff from back in January and it's not his new info? Has Ballard gotten to a point as a GM where he's like, show me another option? Someone also brought up, I don't really get why the Colts would let this out. You're either hurting trade value, and then, this is more of a philosophical statement.
Right.
You don't burn a bridge before a new one is built. All fair points.
I just hope they told Carson before it happened.
And then you got the weird, it's told that, Wentz and Irsay were in Knoxville, Tennessee this past weekend. I'm like, wait, what? Why? I could have sworn Wentz had a family home in Texas in the offseason. Are they going to the Super Bowl together? It sounded like it was there for at least a night, maybe a couple days as well. I'm like, what in the world? And then someone was like, Cooper Manning could be there. I'm like, wait, what is going on here? I was very confused by all of that, and I'm still very confused by all of it. And we'll see what happens. But, I still believe Jim Irsay is irate. Is he irate enough to step in and make a move?
Right. And you have to wonder the time element in terms of lifespan into this is like, hey, I don't know how much longer I can be doing this.
Irsay, you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I want to ring another Lombardi, damn it, tomorrow.
Yeah. And again, seeing what all-in Rams, all-in Bucks. Can the Colts be all-in? Probably not to that level, but seeing them do it, and maybe it was the urgency of them hosting a Super Bowl,
That too.
Maybe that played into some of it.
This one from Colton. So we obviously need a tight end, but why not just roll with Mo Alley Cox, and just start feeding him the ball more? We've seen what he can do.
Yeah, this is kind of a popular question that we get here. I think when you look at Mo Alley Cox, there is just a lack of consistency. Him as a route runner, him as a pass catcher, at times it's just like a little clunky.
Yes.
And I'm not ripping them. I mean, the dude played basketball, it's not like he has a heavy football background. It's just kind of the reality of where he's at. I'm totally good with bringing back Mo Alley Cox, a free agent, but then I think you still need to go out and get a tight end, assuming Jack Doyle does retire. Because also, Eddie, there's an element at tight end where it's like you've got to make up for the lack of what you have at wideout too. And we'll see. I don't know. Can Nyheim Hines help in that area? I know it's something Ballard was frustrated with at the end of the year, Hines' lack of production. So I look at tight end and say, Kylan Granson, sure. Mo Alley Cox, sure. But you still need another one. I don't look at I don't know if Alley Cox needs to be fed like that. I don't know if he can handle that. I think he can handle something and can help you out, but I don't know if you just want to be giving him that definite, unquestioned number one sort of target role. I think he's just had ups and downs throughout his career, and part of that's just the dude is new to football.
Colton, like you said, we've seen what he can do.
Yeah, good and bad.
Yeah. He to me, you look at him, he's like, okay, he's athletic. Then there's times you're like, okay, he's not athletic.
Yeah, it's just, the fluidity of him as an athlete isn't the smoothest thing. I mean, he's a big freaking dude. I'm not asking him to run 4.4, but
right.
I just think there's a little bit of that.
I think health plays a little bit into it, too.
Yeah, I think he plays through some stuff.
When he's healthy, he looks good. When he's not, he does not. This is from Gary. Never miss a pod. Always love the pod.
Let's go, Gary. Thank you.
What should I, as a fan, expect the 2022 roster to look like realistically if Irsay and Ballard truly go, quote, all in? Of course, I agree with you. Left tackle, pass rush, lockdown corner, and beast wideout are needed. But what should I be expecting? And if you don't address one of those, which do you not address?
Okay, so a lot of good points there from Gary. I mentioned it earlier. I think you got room for 4 serious moves, Eddie. And let's just kind of put quarterback to the side for a second.
Yep.
I look at free agency as 2, 10, double-digit $1 million contracts. Is what you can do in free agency outside of your own building. And then you got 2 in the draft. As far as the one position I think you can retain, I honestly, and this is above my pay grade, but if my medical team checked off on Eric Fisher, I'd probably go with bringing back Fisher. I know a lot of people disagree with that, Eddie, but if you believe the 2-year remove from a torn Achilles leads to better success, then, if we're grading him last year as a pass protector, if he was a D+, can you get to a C+ or a B-?
He's still got good football in him.
And that is what Ballard says, and we should probably actually point that out. I mean, Ballard believes that. So the other thing that Ballard said about Fisher, which I was left really scratching my head, Ballard mentioned that Fisher was asked to do some things differently with the Colts. I assume that means from just a schematic standpoint, protection, blocking, whatever. And I'm thinking, shouldn't that have caused you hesitancy to make that move? He can't practice in training camp. He's going to get no preseason reps. Now you're asking him to do things differently. There's a bit of projecting people into your environment that you've got to make sure you've created an atmosphere for them to succeed. That doesn't seem like the most successful plan for a guy coming off a torn Achilles in late January. That, to me, was a bit head-scratching of geez, this is... that's a bit on kind of GM coaching.
Maybe they felt like since he's a veteran and he's been around the game long enough that maybe he could make a kind of a switch in some degree.
Sure, but again, torn Achilles, dude. Oof,
I agree.
That's just and a quick, rehab with torn Achilles there. So, Gary, when I look at this, left tackle of the future, I still think needs to be explored, but like, do you just stopgap it for another year with Fisher? And I believe pass rusher needs to be a move you explore, but the development of Kwity Paye and Dayo Adengbo is probably atop the list in terms of need that you've got to get done this year. Like, you have to develop. They're in-house. You spent high picks on them. You got to develop them.
For me, out of that group,
I can't do it
to
with
not
Whiteout.
address.
Whiteout, you got to go out. No, I can't. Ashton Dillon's never caught more than 2 balls in a game. Desmond Patman's caught 2 balls in his NFL career. Mike Strawn played, 10 snaps after the first 2 weeks of the season? Like, you can't bank on those guys.
I think he had more inactives than he did snaps played. I'd have to check that, but I think the two that'll be most addressed, my opinion, you can back this up or whatever, pass rush and wideout. I don't think corner lockdown is going to fit or does fit.
I think that's fair.
The Bradley system. I can see them bringing in like a Casey Hayward. Just played with them in the Raiders organization.
Gus Bradley connection. Followed Gus Bradley from the Chargers to the Raiders.
Right. He's a free agent. I think that's a guy that you can get on the cheap. I think that'll be one of those friendly salaries that you can bring in during the offseason. But I think wideout and pass rush are the two that'll probably get the most attention.
Yeah. No, I probably would agree with that as well.
This is from Patrick. Hey, Kevin, I'm just thinking with a new mindset of Bradley at defensive coordinator, ideally more aggressive, will the Colts look for more man coverage type corners instead of zone type corners? And what does that mean for the guys on our roster? Thanks for always taking my questions.
Well, Patrick, thank you for sending. For those that missed kind of our Gus Bradley analysis, that was on last week's pod. I brought up how I was speaking with someone that has been on a Bradley staff, and they mentioned, no man, very minimal press. Now, Gus Bradley said all the right things at the press conference last week in the sense of I'll cater to personnel and I don't always do things the same way at every stop, and there's a lot of validity to it. Obviously, you haven't drafted, to your point you just made, Eddie, you haven't really drafted to a bunch of man corners, really. To me, press is what I really like just because it can disrupt that initial timing. You think back to the 4th and 1 that Donald makes the play on to end the game. Burrow has to hitch looking left. When he hitched, I don't think that was because of Donald. Donald initially kind of gets pushed out to the outside on that first rush move. I don't know if it was a mix-up at the top. I'd have to look at the all 22 a little bit.
So I saw a film breakdown of this somewhere. He had C.J. Uzomah going out into the flat, and he was reading, I think it was Darius Williams, the defensive back, of whether he was going to fall back and take the wide receiver or if he was going to stay on Uzomah. And I think Williams was in that. It was in the blind spot where Burrow couldn't see around Uzomah, and that he could have came around and deflected the pass. But if you turn right, I don't know if you saw this, Jamar Chase had Jalen Ramsey on his ass.
Yeah, I know. And part of me was wondering, Ramsey, did he jump? We saw him jump the first play of that drive, try to be a hero there. Was Ramsey trying to jump something? Does he hear the crowd roar? Does he know that pressure's at Burrow? Burrow's going to get rid of it. I'm going to jump it. I don't know. Maybe I'm giving Ramsey too much credit in that situation.
Right.
But basically what I'm getting at, Eddie, is you disrupted Burrow's timing before Donald could finish the play.
Agreed.
And, that's what you get at with kind of press and stuff. Boy, listen to Gus Bradley, though, last week. So to answer Patrick's question, I don't think they're going to explore a bunch of man corners. I don't necessarily think that's the path. But again, to your answer, or I guess to expand a little bit on Bradley, you walk out of that presser last Wednesday, I see why guys want to play for him. And there are some free agents. We'll get into this more as free agency approaches here in about a month. There are several Raider defenders that are hitting free agency. Do you have guys that, the Titans aren't a great example, but, the Packers are offering this, the Colts are offering this. It's pretty much the same. But, man, I hear great things about playing for Gus Bradley.
Yeah,
that is real. Does that get you over the finish line of some of these free agents?
I know you got about 10, 15 minutes or so. You're very high profile, have a very tight schedule. So
no, boy.
This one is from Jordan. Hey, Kevin.
Boss man wants to talk. Never good.
Hey, Kevin, what would it take, in your opinion, to get into the first round to draft a quarterback if there is one they like? And do you think that is the better option versus anyone in the free agent market or rolling with Wentz?
Okay, Jordan, good question. I did the trade value chart, Eddie. I believe I saw this. If the Colts gave up their third rounder, they could go from the middle of the second where they are right now to the back end of the first. So you'd be looking at a first-round pick, obviously nothing in the second, obviously nothing in the third, and then you'd pick again in the fourth. I think they would have a couple compensatory picks coming their way a little bit later.
I thought they still had a third.
Well, no, I'm saying under this scenario, you'd be trading your second and your third. The advantage, obviously, is you get the fifth-year rookie option on that quarterback with all first-round picks, which is critical at that position as well. And again, Jordan, there will be people on draft night that if that happens, they're going to be like, why? The Colts need more draft picks. They don't have a first-rounder. Eddie, if you hit on it, what did the Ravens trade up to get into the first round to take Lamar Jackson? Didn't they trade up to get to that last pick of the first round and take Lamar? It's an argument that we'll have on April 29th, and it's an argument that if you hit on the pick, you'll never have it again. What could that third-round pick have been? It could be T.Y. Hilton. It could also be DeJon Smith. That's just the reality of where you're at there. That's what it would look like, Jordan, to your answer. I think you'd be giving up your third rounder and obviously your second to move into the first.
This is from Simpson. If the Colts are looking to create cap room / lower their offensive line investment, is the move to trade Kelly and slot Pinter in as a replacement? Kelly has had some injury issues, is aging, and is expensive. What are your thoughts?
Simpson, I think this is a great, great question. Eddie, at some point you got to sacrifice at some spots. Interior offensive line is typically an area where you see NFL teams sacrifice. We went over the O-line investments last week on the pod with the 2 Super Bowl participants. I would say every time, and I like Ryan Kelly. I like how he's wired. I think he brings kind of an element that's needed in that O-line room.
He's really smart, too.
Yeah, very smart. And I also just kind of more of kind of the hard-ass mentality where I was getting at. But no, I'm glad you pointed that out. The fact that every time I listen to the Colts talk about Danny Pinter, I walk away thinking, wow, they love him, and they love him at center, not guard. Or I should say center much more than guard. It's probably a better way to put it. So I'm just kind of thinking, when is that passing of the torch? Is it ever going to happen? I mean, to be fair, Ryan Kelly was drafted 18th overall. Danny Pinter was drafted 160-something overall, wherever he was. There is a different level there. But again, Kelly was always kind of I think he was an older rookie if I'm not mistaken. So he kind of had that going against him. So that I think is something to keep, just to kind of keep in mind of all right, can you sacrifice? Where do you sacrifice? Are you able to save money there? One thing I wanted to clarify, we had a question about Carson Wentz and the restructuring of his contract on the last podcast, and I don't know if I honestly was very accurate in kind of speaking to it. Somebody asked me this question on Twitter, and I don't know if I'm sure some people out there's a great Colts cap Kyle. It does a great job of kind of I've
never heard of that guy before.
Keeping much more intel.
The Tony East of the Colts? Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. With the salary cap of the Colts. Basically, I was asked, what would a Wentz restructure look like? I threw that at him, and he goes, a pay cut isn't really possible for Wentz. 15 of his $22 million base salary is already guaranteed, and the other $7 million becomes guaranteed on March 19th. So he has no incentive to restructure. Restructure doesn't make sense either, or I guess a pay cut. He doesn't have a reason to take a pay cut. A restructure doesn't make sense either because it would push dead money into future years where there isn't any currently. The best financial move would be to trade him before March 19th. Then you have zero dead cap, but that means you have to find someone willing to pay him that guaranteed money. So I wanted to clarify what we said last week with the cap. All right, we got 4 more?
Yes.
Okay.
I didn't know Juan Pablo Montoya was a big fan of the pod.
Hey now. We are global. Juan Pablo, fiery individual. Great racer.
I don't know if this is actually from Juan Pablo Montoya, but this is from Juan Pablo. Hey, Kevin, hope the family is doing great and not so cold these days.
Yeah. Welcome to Indiana in February, Juan Pablo.
I have a question for the podcast for this week. Do you think that Mr. Irsay will stay quiet if during the offseason he sees Ballard with his same MO, not going after any proven wide receiver, tight end, or even pass rushers, if he goes as always after third string free agents, will Irsay let the season play out, or will he say, wait a minute, Chris, this just doesn't work anymore. You have to sign these guys, and it's not negotiable. Sorry. Just wondering, because I believe after listening to Ballard, he will remain stubborn about getting proven weapons for the offense. Thank you, as always, for the awesome job you do, and thank you to Chris, too. Take care, your friend from Colombia.
Juan Pablo, thank you very much for that. I appreciate it, and glad that you're listening. Hope all is safe down in Colombia. I don't think you can afford to say, wait a minute. I just don't think you're in a position anymore. Meddling is such a bad word to use, but, I think you have to step in. You got to do things differently. I'm such a firm believer in that. Eddie, if this podcast was getting 123 downloads into this is probably the fifth year I've done this podcast, probably be time to do some things differently,
Yeah.
So, if you are the Colts have been an average football team in the Chris Ballard era. I think that's pretty accurate if you look at the record, if you look at where they finished the AFC, whatever. Okay, let's do some things differently. You can have a blueprint, you can have core philosophies, tweaks, adjustments. I think those are necessary. So I don't think Ballard is at a point. I'm curious, going back to the Jim Irsay's demanding changes. What are those changes? To me, the most likely change that would be substantial as well would be the free agency philosophy that we'll see play out here in the month. The other substantial changes are a change in GM, a change in head coach, a change of quarterback, firing Eberflus. None of those happen. Well, we'll see about changing quarterback, but obviously the other ones haven't happened. So when you put it as substantial and realistic, the philosophy with free agency, I think, makes the most sense to me.
I think the skill position, the wide receiver specifically, is something that may have irked Irsay a little bit because, you have two gold jacket guys there for a while, and Marvin and Reggie, and then you go Reggie to T.Y. together, both very good, even though it was the latter stages of Reggie's career. He was still a good wide receiver. And then you go from T.Y. to nobody.
Yeah. No, I think it's a very good point. The wide receivers of this franchise has meant something quite a lot over the past couple decades.
Yeah.
Quite a lot.
2 questions left. This one from Zach B. Hey, Kevin, love the podcast. Probably the most honest and truthful coverage we get. So very thankful for that. With the free agency coming up, what wideouts do you see the Colts targeting if Ballard finally stops neglecting the position? Thanks.
Zach, thank you for those words. As our listeners know, that's our goal. Honest. That's what we're striving for here in Kevin's Corner. Boy, Eddie, you look at the wide receiver list in free agency.
You got some guys recovering.
Oh my gosh, and Odell Beckham added to it.
You got Odell.
Allen Robinson, DJ Shark, Michael Gallup,
Chris Godwin.
Yeah, tore his ACL. Mike Williams is a name I've always liked, obviously former top 10 pick, but dude, I feel like he's always hurt. I feel like maybe I just watched the Chargers and I'm like, wait, Mike Williams is on the ground again?
I think he only missed maybe 1 or 2 games this year in comparison to more.
It feels like he's always playing through something, though.
Right. I mean, he came out of college, he had that neck issue,
that was scary.
Really set him back.
The guy in Dallas that I also like is Cedric Wilson, the Boise State product.
Oh, me too.
A little bit further down the depth chart there, and again, there'd be a bit of projection there. But it seems like that would be more of a Ballard sort of move than some of those ones. So basically what I'm getting at is I like some of those names I mentioned. DJ Shark I think is interesting, but these are some serious injuries. You really have got to dive into that and figure out what you believe in, really. And this is just the reality of the wideout group. Will Fuller, injury-riddled career, I wouldn't go Fuller. I said as a Notre Dame guy. So, yeah.
I really like Gallup.
Yep.
He's one of those guys where you can just throw it up and he'll go up and get it.
And that was ACL too, right?
Yes. I'm not worried about him as in comparison to some of those other guys because he's younger. So he should be able to come back fine, if not better. Let's see if we can fit 2 in.
Yeah, 2 in.
This one from Sincere. With Darius Leonard probably not winning Defensive Player of the Year, confirmed, do you think we would have if he put up 9 or 10 sacks with the rest of his stats from this year. If someone gave you the choice, would you rather take 10 plus sacks from him a year or for him to consistently get the turnovers he's gotten all year for the rest of his career?
Well, I think sacks did hurt his candidacy. I mean, he had none. Obviously the play against Derek Carr is what we remember the most. I do think the ankle limitation played into a lot of that. But as far as what would I take, the sacks or the turnovers? I mean, for sure. But remember, Darius Leonard is an off-ball linebacker. I'm not expecting him to get 8 to 10 sacks a year. You got 4 guys rushing the passer up front that are supposed to handle the sacks. Sure, you want to see him around a handful just because he is such a talented dude. But no, turnovers.
This one from JJ. Are the Colts made up of, quote, high character players as they claim? Would a high-character team lose 4 out of the 4 of the first 5 and the last 2 to interim coaches when favored?
JJ, the high-character question is one that we get a decent amount. It's something that I've come around on with Chris Ballard. Again, you guys have heard me say that I still believe you got to have a couple of screw-loose guys in there that can kind of offset some things, can ruffle some feathers when needed, can kind of provide that edge that I think is necessary in an NFL locker room. To me, the high character is, will you work hard to get to your individual peak? Are you self-motivated? That, I think, is the high character. I just think, in general, handling success has been an issue for this team. Now, NFL teams should be professionals. Like IU basketball, they really don't handle success very well. We've seen that now for like several years.
That's a whole another road.
And it might be a bad analogy, Eddie, but like the college kids, okay, I get why handling success can be difficult. Like if you are on IU's campus and you are a basketball player, you'll have like 4 dudes willing to like carry your books to and from class. You'll probably have a few girls asking if you want to eat at their, table at Gresham or Reed. Reed has got great food at IU if you're ever down there on campus, by the way. But just it's insane how they're worshipped. The NFL, it's like, I mean, again, you shouldn't even be a professional at this point. But handling success, it's been an issue. I don't know if that's high character. Again, you would think the high character guys would be more able to handle that, but it's a fair question, JJ.
So I just got a notification from ESPN about who the best fit at wide receiver for the Colts would be.
Yeah.
Would you like to take a guess as to who Matt Bowen thinks?
Cedric Wilson.
Allen Robinson.
Boy. The Colts were, I think, interested in Robinson last free agency. He was coming off the ACL, wasn't he, leaving Jacksonville?
Yeah.
I was going to say, I thought that was the case. Eddie Garrison, I've got to run to a meeting. Tremendous job, as always. Hopefully our Redlegs will play baseball this year. Actually, hopefully they probably won't play baseball considering.
Pitchers and catchers were supposed to report today.
No, man. Absolutely hate it. In all seriousness, man, great insight as always. Thank you for the last minute filling in. I know you got a busy night tonight producing the Pacers, so I appreciate that.
No problem. Like the lottery for the Pacers, I come around every now and then.
Plug in your Twitter real fast.
At Eddie Garrison _.
Boom. At Eddie Garrison _ at KBowen1070. Everybody have a great week. We'll talk to you next week. Combine in 2 weeks. Later.